Hello everybody, my name is TheTfboy and welcome to another tips and tricks video. This time we're going to be taking a look at Macro, which is arguably the most overpowered bot in the game. And I can understand why. I recently just got him about an hour and a half ago real time, and I just did a PvP match with him. So I have a pretty good idea. I've also played against him many times on the Decepticon side, so I have a pretty good idea of this guy, and I'm going to share my information for you. Now, first most is that, a lot of people argue that this guy is overpowered and such. I don't disagree, because he has a lot of offensive capabilities, but his equipment makes him extremely defensive. However, Macro's main weakness is that all of these equipments here is very prone to AoE attacks, such as, Flatlines grenades, or his misfield, or mismatches S-Tech on his Aura minigun, stuff like that. So, most of you who are probably watching this already know how most of Macro's equipment, so I'm not going to go over that, but his misfield and mainly his misfield is the problematic one that a lot of people complain. And like I said, it's very prone to AoE attacks, so that's one way to counter him. And that's one thing you need to watch out as your Macro. Because you're not, despite contrary belief, you're not invincible to all ranged attacks. So just keep that in mind. Now I find it best to combine the atmospheric optimizer with either of these two, depending on the circumstances. I've noticed that it does have the shortest cooldown of both of these, to the point where sometimes I can switch between use this and this, and then by the time this cools down, this is ready, and vice versa. So it's definitely a very good idea to combine this with your camouflage shield or the Onyx Scrambler. Though, again, it is only shield damage, so keep that in mind. His weapons, now, in terms of tuning, I have 9 in Spark, 9 in Omni, 15 in Spark Strength, so I have them tuned a bit more to a tank, and then 3 in Regeneration. And Regeneration is actually quite important because this guy has no way of receiving self-heals. He's one of the few bots that actually have no methods of repairing himself. So the only way to get back health is through a medic or consumable or a power core, or just waiting for your health to regen. So adding a few points of regeneration isn't a bad idea. Now, in terms of his weapons, you have his laser rifle, which is Omni. You have his grenade launcher, which is Spark. Oh, the laser rifle deals slows and increases mischance. Grenade launcher is damage over time, and the Delta Sword is the is a massive attack that consumes all the memory edge buffs. Now the memory edge buffs works basically whenever damage is received, and it says to a cap of 20. That basically means, at least from what I've experienced, is that every time you take damage, whether it's by a rocket launcher, a minigun, or a hammer, it stacks, and it can cap up to 20. Bear in mind, and it doesn't matter how you take damage or how much damage you take. Each time you take damage, it increases the cap. So rocket launchers may not be that much effective at increasing the cap, but like weapons like Shell Shock's minigun or Mismatch's minigun, each of those shots increases the tick. So that's something to keep in mind. And then of course each stack member also reduces incoming damage by 0.75%, doubled if inside the camouflage shield. So that basically means, if you do the math on that, that is, I did this earlier, 20 times 75, 10 times 45, basically a 15% reduction when it's capped, and a 30% reduction when you're in the camouflage shield. So just keep that in mind when using this guy. Now, as for his S-Techs, I like to actually wait for this guy to get a level 2 S-Tech. For the grenade launcher and the Delta Sword. The Delta Sword actually can do massive damage. I've been able to one-shot a lot of cons. Like, I've been able to do 9, 7, 8, 900 spark damage with the Delta Sword when it's capped out at max. So that's something to keep in mind, because I find this very useful. Bear in mind that there's no way to combine this with where was it? The atmospheric optimizer, simply because that only does shield damage and this is a spark weapon. Now you could combine that if the enemy has a little bit of shield left and you want to use the Aztec. That's fine. The damage does carry over if there is enough of it. I was able to one-shot a Dust Storm that had, I think, 25% of her shield left and all of her spark in the PvP match that I did. So, very powerful weapon, very good finisher move. Definitely do recommend it if you can get close. If not, a level 2 Aztec on the grenade launcher should be just as fine. Because that, based on the way I've attuned, it can do from 70 to 74 damage per tick. Though it doesn't last long. I think it lasts about maybe 10 seconds, if I recall. I'm not entirely sure. And the Aztec for the laser rifle I rarely use. I only use it if the enemy's trying to get away and is on low health. But, you know, it's not really a requirement for me. Now in terms of power cores, I have dealing a critical hit repairs your warrior for up to 20% of the damage dealt. Now, this is not, I don't have this power core just because Macro doesn't receive any self heals. I have it because of these next, this next one, which is receiving a repair reduces equipment cooldown by 0.24 seconds. This is actually very, very useful and quite overpowered with this guy, especially if you have a healer on your team. Because you can basically cycle through your equipment to where you're at least in either one of them if you use this right. So I find this very useful for macro. Taking damage fuels the Aztec gauge by 2.6. Again, very useful. If I want to finish off an enemy, or if someone's attacking me. Getting my Aztec gauge to a level 2 is highly crucial if finishing them off, especially with the Delta Sword. And then Critical Assaulter, which is receiving a critical hit, increases damage dealt by 20% for 4 seconds, has a 12-second cooldown boost. Now, although this is a boost, this is very dangerous when having a Firebreaker around. So, you have to keep this in mind. But it's not bad for what it is. I find this very useful. Sometimes, if you time it right, you can combine it with the Delta Sword or the grenade launcher, which again is very useful, and you could do massive damage with this guy. Now, what do you say I show him off and I show you how exactly everything works?
Time's up, Decepticons.
Now, one thing I have to notice is that his laser rifle and his sword is very, very different than a standard, your standard laser rifle and your standard charge melee weapon. And I need a target to show the laser rifle. Oh, also, the consumable I have is the prosthetic patch, which heals me over time, and his vehicle mode equipment allows me to cloak. So you don't see a thing. Very good defensive. Alright. Yeah. There you go. Did anyone else notice that, okay, so with the laser rifle, as you saw there, it has a very slow, it is a very quick cooldown, but it has a very quick recovery from when the cooldown is maxed out. Which is very interesting because no other bot in this game has a laser rifle like this. Every other bot that I've played, actually every other, well, aside from any of the founders, but any other bot that I've played hasn't had a laser rifle with this fast cooldown or this fast recovery rate. So that is just something to keep in mind. Let's see if we can get a good mission.
In times of need, we can't afford to waste it.
There we go. Okay. And also, his Delta Sword also is probably the fastest melee charge weapon that I've seen. I mean, that is just incredible how fast this charges to max. It's definitely a lot quicker than any melee weapon I've noticed. Oh god, look at all the Terragons. Okay. Alright, let's use some of the equipment. So, this is the mist field, though it doesn't really matter. Well, I guess that was the last of them. So the mist field is pretty self-explanatory. Any ranged attacks or melee in that field will cause the miss, if I recall. Yes, but any AoE attacks don't miss, so keep that in mind.
Time to unwind.
There we go. Now let me just give you a perspective of combining that with the Ionic Scrambler, which normally it'll deal 50% extra shield damage. Now this is going to do 150. I mean, just look at that. Like, that was a... Bear in mind that this is only a 3v3 Omni weapon. Alright, 6 and 5. That was a waste, but oh well. Still. There's really nothing more to say about Macro other than, you know, he's a great support bot, and he's definitely fantastic with the medic. Like, seriously, if you're on the con side, I've noticed that any Macro plus medic, whether it's Sparkscape, or even Sparkscape, Tri-Age, or Meltdown, that's going to be a very hard match, especially if the Macro knows how to play well, and has that, increase receiving a repair reduces equipment cooldowns by 0.24 seconds, because that'll be devastating. That's one of the worst combos I've dealt with in terms of fighting with Macro.
I saw enough Terracons back on Cybertron.
But he can't protect everyone, and even the allies need to understand that AoE attacks still will hurt you in the mist field, so... now some people have argued that this guy is overpowered, and like I said, I can't disagree. He's definitely got... his laser rifle and his sword is definitely a very unique weapon. Especially how the cooldown works. And how short the cooldown time is for both of the weapons. Like I said, I don't disagree. But I feel as though his weapons aren't the reason that he's overpowered. Aside from maybe that memory edge, maybe that could be reduced a bit. But I think his mist field is the problem. Or not his mist field, which is basically the Ionic Scrambler. I keep calling it mist field because that's what everyone else calls it. But yes. Now the only way I could recommend that be changed is that if melee attacks don't apply to the mist field.
Something big is about to go down.
That I feel would maybe balance it out a bit more. But, you know, otherwise, you know, the camouflage shield, pretty self-explanatory. I don't consider that overpowered because, you know, it's very easy to avoid that. And, the atmospheric optimizer, you know, one could argue that that's overpowered, especially on shield. Especially considering, you know, this guy basically has a combo of dealing massive shield and massive spark damage if you time it right. So that's something to keep in mind. Now one other thing to keep in mind is that a lot of people have used what is that? I forget the name of the consumable, but it's the one that instantly increases your STEC gauge by 200 points. That's not bad, but that's almost like forcing the memory. But that is kind of a waste, personally. I don't mind letting my STEC recharge, because by the time I get to a level 2 STEC, I know that I would have taken enough damage where I could have capped the memory edge subsystem. So that's really all I have to say for the guy. Very good support character, very good. Definitely someone to watch out on the PvP side. He can be devastating if used right.
In times of need, we can't afford to waste anything.
And for anyone who knows what he's doing, especially if you have a medic and just that one power core, he can just keep cycling through his equipment back and forth. So just keep that in mind when playing as him, and keep that in mind when fighting against him. But he's not bad for what he's worth. I'm gonna keep trying him out. And we'll just see what happens. So yeah, that's basically all I have to say for the guy. Very good offensively, very good defensively. Does, like I said, definitely, one thing to also say is that he's better in more open maps. Like, he's not good in Old Jasper, which is, I believe, is that Ruined City PvP map. Just because there's too many buildings, and it's very easy to turn a corner while he has either of his equipment activated. So just keep that in mind. Yes, that's all I really have to say for now. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. And tomorrow I'm actually going to be doing another tips and tricks video on a bot I already did. And the reason for that is because I messed around with the tuning on this guy, and I really just want to share. I'll give you a hint, it's an Autobot, but I just basically messed around the tuning on this bot, and I just think it's better this way. And I don't want to give a false, because how I had him tuned before was purely offensive, but I realized that this guy should be tuned purely defensively, and I'm talking about the bot that I'm reviewing tomorrow. So I will explain this tomorrow, but anyways, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and or I hope you guys found this useful. End stream.